Welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing with your hosts, Brian Sallee and Michael Muilenburg, where business leaders across the industry share their unique challenges and insights.
It's almost like magic because it takes the learning process sometimes from weeks down to days, sometimes hours.
We want to help people within manufacturing and make them excited to come to work every day and go home safe to their family.
When you bring people in, they're anything but a machine. They're partners that can help you build your business. They can be your success if you treat them right.
And then you start having employees saying, when are you doing my machine? When are you going to come over here to my department? And now you get this buy-in.
This podcast is brought to you by Dazuki, the premier frontline digital transformation solution that allows manufacturers to standardize operations.
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Hey, great, Brian. Happy spring.
Yeah, the snow is melting and the weather's warming up. There's a lot going on as well in manufacturing. I don't know about you, but I've been playing around with a lot of these AI tools, and it's just amazing to see what you can do with some of them. I think the most interesting use case I've found already is being able to upload a set of data and have the AI analyze it and produce reports for you. And it's really got me thinking, how much Industry 4.0, the adoption of a lot of these technologies, how much it's going to accelerate, but then also how much we need to do to train people on these technologies and get them up to speed. And our guest today is LaRuthie Mason, and LaRuthie's from a manufacturing company called Shaw. You've probably used their products before. I know I've got their carpet in my home, but they also do flooring and I'm sure a lot of other products. But welcome to the show, LaRuthie.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Michael, for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I'm curious what you might tell us a little bit more about Shaw for those who aren't familiar with the company and your role there.
Shaw Manufacturing is a manufacturing organization, and we manufacture and produce commercial and residential floor coverings or another surface coverings. So anywhere from hard surfaces like hardwood or resilient tile and stone to soft surfaces like carpets and rug, like you mentioned. But we even get to the development of synthetic turf that you see on sports fields and even covering landfills and things like that. And everything in between. I mean, for me to even just go over the product catalog, it's just so much that we do, but it's really about providing flooring solutions and floor covering solutions for those industries.
I didn't realize you guys were doing like the sports turf type of stuff. And then you said landfills as well. Like, are you guys doing the membranes they put down underneath those landfills?
The closure turf.
Okay.
That goes over it, yeah.
Tell us, what's your background at Shaw? What are you currently doing there and how'd you get started in manufacturing?
So my time in manufacturing began, of course, when I went to college. My background is math and mechanical engineering, and I started to get some experience as an engineer by co-oping for Shaw Industries, and that's when I first learned about the company. And over my time with Shaw, I was able to serve as a project engineer for some years and a plant engineer for some years on the manufacturing side. And for the last 9 years, I've been leading the technical learning and development phase, serving as the corporate manager of technical education. So that's my current role at Shaw. And in that role, I get to support development of mechanics, electricians, and engineers that work on the manufacturing side of the company.
Also, you're really, when we talk about corporate, you're talking about across the entire company, which I know you guys have quite a few plants. How many plants are you guys covering with your programs?
With our programs, that's a very good question. We have several plants that are typically in the Southeast area, but we also have facilities that are on the West Coast as well. So maybe about 39 to 40 plants, to my understanding.
And how many total employees?
Shaw has 20,000 plus
Okay.
associates that work here. So it's a pretty large company. But of course, my target audience really kind of gets into that maintenance and engineering workforce, which is probably somewhere around 2,000.
Yeah. And LaRuthie, when I think about the products you guys make, like I think process manufacturing, right? You've got big machines that are producing these materials. And I imagine maintenance is probably one of the most important roles within the company to keep these machines running. Tell us a little bit about how things have changed as we're moving into Industry 4.0. What are some of the changes you're seeing in the skill sets that are required of these maintenance technicians and your engineers to be able to work with this new equipment?
We are definitely seeing a need for more advanced skills because, typically on the mechanical side, that doesn't change a whole lot. Now, the complexity of the process may require you to use more of those mechanical skill sets, but definitely on the electrical automation and control side, we're definitely starting to see quite a few changes. And just getting that group ready and prepared for what's coming is going to definitely take some time and effort for sure.
Do you also find that your lines run multiple products, so changeovers are a big deal as well?
Absolutely. Again, changeovers, anytime that you have to change and switch to a different process, or even if the line goes down, that really does take a skilled team that is very knowledgeable, not just of the components that make up that equipment, but also having a full understanding of the theory of operation of that line and the sequence of events and how it should run when things are going well, so that they can make those changes so that when they do run into problems that they can make those adjustments on the fly to, reduce that downtime and stay efficient and effective.
And Ruthie, you've been in this role, you mentioned, I think, for 9 years. And
Yes.
so you're seeing the rapid advancement of technology, I'm sure. The area I think Michael and I are really curious is you're in this learning and development organization, and you've got these big changes that are happening to your guys' equipment. New technologies are coming in. And I'm curious, how are you guys thinking about the role of learning and development, your guys' role in that organization, and how you're supporting manufacturing operations? Like what's the big shift at, if there is one?
The big shift is that since a good bit of this technology will be new, you're not going to be able to find people that already have these skill sets, right? There was a time where the schools already had everything electrical and everything mechanical just already set up in their labs and in their lectures. So you could basically hire somebody and it wouldn't take a whole lot to kind of get them acclimated to that new work environment. But with this newer technology, a lot of the industries are actually the first to get access or the first to use it, not necessarily the academia. So it really is up to the organizations to get the L&D team plugged in early on to understand what's coming, what is going to be required, what knowledge, skill, abilities, what capabilities will they need, to fully support it. So that's kind of the biggest change because it is kind of so new at this time. We don't have the luxury of just, oh, this person has 10 years of, you know, autonomous vehicles experience or 10 years in AI. It's like, no, this is new for everybody. And just finding out that expert actually might have just, maybe just got out of high school because they worked on a special team. So it's just very interesting. You'll have to find non-traditional ways of finding that talent, but then of course have a true strategy and a plan to upskill and reskill the current workforce that has to support that new technology that's coming in.
As your organization in learning and development, like you have to be out in front of these technologies, it seems, as the company looks to adopt, we're going to bring in whatever technology, you got to be out in front. What are you guys doing to, and this, Michael, I think this probably fits into your wheelhouse too, scouting new technologies and understanding the skill sets that are going to be required to adopt these technologies. What does that process look like at your organization?
Yeah, that was my
Uh,
question too.
Well, you definitely just have to have a seat at the table with those technical leaders that are bringing that new technology in. You can't just sit and wait until it gets in and it gets fully installed because then you're going to like, okay, well, who's going to run this and who's going to repair it? So being plugged in early on and being able to be present as the equipment is going in, as the OEM is present and figuring things out and debugging and commissioning, just trying to make sure that your team is plugged in at the very beginning so that you are aware of what's coming, understanding what your current workforce, again, what they're capable of doing, measuring that gap and ensuring that whatever learning solutions that you put out there can fill that gap, for the sake of performance. Because that's what you ultimately want. You ultimately want to be able to ensure that your workforce can support whatever changes the advancements and the modernizations bring to the table.
Most of my experience is the technology shows up and then you say, how are we going to do the training or who's going to do it or how does this thing work? Until recent times, we actually brought trainers and started writing work standards and bringing people in on technologies that were still being developed, that were still in the lab, still in the shop. And that's changed for me. I've seen that more in the last 3 years than ever before, because in the past it was here it is. Good luck with that. Go find some people. So it sounds like you're ahead of the curve. So good for you.
I will say that I am very fortunate to work for an organization that does truly value developing people and preparing them for those changes. I do recognize that not every industry has gotten there yet, but I am really fortunate that I do work for an organization that supports the development of their people, recognizes that you just can't let people figure it out on their own because that's just so much time and wasted effort and all those that goes if you don't have a plan in place to prepare the people. So again, I'm just fortunate that at least my organization, they see the value in it, and I do have a seat at the table, and my team can get plugged in early on to prepare for what's going on. Now, do we always get it right? I mean, of course not, but again, we're a lot further in than we have been in the past, and this is just a really exciting time to be in this technical L&D space because there's a lot of work to be done to keep up with those changes.
It is an exciting time. And I guess one of the things I'm really curious about is your organization's pretty mature. You guys have been doing this for a while. You've probably been thinking about, how do we train people to these new technologies? How are people going to be able to learn? And Michael and I, we talk about this a lot, but the skill gap is large. I always joke around, but it's true. Like we are educating people on the difference between a Phillips screwdriver and a flat screwdriver a lot of times when they come into an organization. Like that's how low the skill level is. And so I'm curious, how have you guys been thinking about the new way of learning, the new way of teaching these operators that are coming into your organization, these maintenance technicians, engineers? How is the way you train them? How is that changing? What's kind of your outlook on that?
I will say that the entire learning landscape has changed over the years. There was a time where those vocational programs were in the schools. So, they were coming out of high school with a lot of these skill sets, or maybe they worked with their parent or, their uncle or granddad or whatever, and they learned these mechanical, electrical skills coming up. And you just don't see that as often. But in the last maybe decade or so, we have seen a lot of schools, especially in our area, that have been bringing these programs back where, kids in high school can take these technical college classes to be mechanics or electricians or somewhere in between. So some of that is happening. But again, when they get into the workforce, there's still more work to be done because we all know that college alone isn't enough. You still also have to give people that real world experience to truly kind of connect those dots. So, again, our focus has been identifying who has an interest or even a passion in performing this type of work or going into this career path and just really empowering them to make that path or to travel down that path. So showing them that, hey, if you have an interest and you really want to do this, we will invest in your training. We will provide the training for you. We will give you time to really practice and grow in this space. And ultimately, you'll have a job waiting for you, if you're successful. So again, we can't just sit back and just wait for that talent to find us. We literally have to create the talent if we can't find it. And that has been our strategy.
Beyond the advanced technology and, more the high tech stuff, what does your onboarding and sort of initiation look like, before you get into all the high tech stuff?
That's a really good question. We typically, again, bring people in and depending on the situation, because adults come in with different skill sets. So you really have to kind of assess where they are. We've been able to come up with a tool that with input from the learner, they give us some information about where they think they are, and then we have a couple of knowledge checks to challenge where they actually are. And based on that, we identify if there are any gaps, and we fill them through different types of training. It could be formal learning, it could be on the job training in the facilities, it could be giving them access to performance support resources at the plant. Some people just need a set of work instructions, or maybe they should just need a checklist. But others, because of their experience, they need a full workshop with hands-on and practice, and they need to get a lot of feedback. So you really have to identify that individual. There is no one size fits all solution. You really truly have to kind of identify where that individual is, where they need to be, and then put a very customized plan to get them to that destination.
Yeah. So the days of the standard handbook, everybody goes through the same training is over, is what I'm hearing.
It's over. Again, you can still have that handbook there, but if they get past the first 10 pages, good on you because I mean, that's just really not how the modern learner cares to learn. Again, there are exceptions, right? I am actually a book person. I love books, but I recognize that not everybody is there with the books. And there was also a time where you would lead an instructor-led class and you would have a PowerPoint slide, you'd have like hundreds of slides, you'd be reading off the PowerPoint. And I imagine at some point in time that your entire audience was fully engaged, but you recognize now that's not how people learn. That's not necessarily how they want to learn, so just really utilizing and leveraging the technology that is out there. What I find that most adult learners really want information that they need. They want it to be relevant, they want it to be accessible, and they don't want it any sooner than they need it, right? So it's and you have to leverage technology to get that to them when they need it. And when they recognize, you know what, I can't really do this on my own. I may need more guidance. I may need an on-the-job mentor, or I actually may need to go to a formal class. Uh, you know, have that option available.
LaRuthie, what does that look like practically? Because I hear several different things from you, right? Like the way information is presented is going to be different or is different when it's presented, right? I think there's a great term, just-in-time learning, right?
Yes,
Work guidance, whatever you want to call it, micro learning.
Micro learning.
Practically,
microlearning.
what does that look like for you guys? How are you supporting? Because I imagine, as you said, everybody comes in with a different skill set, but then also people also, like you said, you like books, you could read the whole manual. Other people just want a little bit of information at a time. So how are you supporting those different types of learners?
It's not easy. And again, like I said, it's not a one size fits solution. So your, I guess, learning ecosystem really does have to cater to just a wide variety of what people need, because that same individual may need different things at different times. So you can't just have, oh, well, I'll just have a book for this. If there are resources that are in like the form of a book, sure, have one available if they really need to have that in hand. But you may have to have a short class, and maybe you don't meet in person. Maybe it's kind of a virtual, like, online class, but definitely utilizing those technologies like mobile devices, mobile learning, and making it very specific to what they need, because sometimes those generic courses, they just don't quite make the connection between this general thing. How does that apply to where I am today and what I need today? So we do often have to partner with our subject matter experts internally and also our top performers being those who actually perform these tasks very well. And we get them together and we identify, well, what is really required to perform these jobs effectively? And we make sure that the procedures are up to date. And then we go out there, and my team may do some filming. So could we create training videos? So again, there's just a wide variety of things, but identifying who those subject matter experts and those top performers are, and co-creating that relevant content that they need that will solve their problems. As if what you're creating isn't going to solve a problem that they have, they're not interested.
I'm so glad you brought up the proven expert. And that's something I'm very passionate about too. I want to learn from, the best. And I think most people do. And if you can capture the knowledge from that expert and make it portable and mobile and, get it to people, I think they're going to learn more. They're going to have more respect for the learning process because you're presenting them with the expert information, not the teaching assistant or the understudy or the person that's still in training. You're actually bringing in the expert knowledge. And along those lines, I was going to make a comment. Have you jumped to the AR, VR, and simulation world as well in your training?
We've dabbled a little bit on the simulation side. We do use some training that does involve the simulation, right? So if you think about like electrical troubleshooting, a lot of times you have to wait until that fault happens before you can truly kind of get in there. So we do have some of our training platforms do allow for simulation. We have tested out some AR and VR, but we haven't quite dug deep into that. But on the personal side, because a lot of people do have experience with that technology just at home. A lot of people play video games and stuff. So having an Oculus on and going through that experience, it won't be new. I do know that we are getting into that, but we haven't gone too far down that road just yet. But I am excited to see where that goes, because that will surely be the next phase of learning for sure.
LaRuthie, I want to go back to, I've got a few points here I want to cover with you because I think it's really interesting. You mentioned something like machine theory. I need to train people. They need to understand, how does this machine work in general versus like how to perform a maintenance procedure. Those are two different types of knowledge, right? And
Absolutely.
one requires skill. So there's a difference between knowledge and skill. And you mentioned what might be a classroom training. I've been thinking that classroom training's dead, but it sounds like there's still a place for it with certain types of training. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you guys are maybe using classroom training or, as you mentioned, maybe it's a video conference like a Zoom meeting?
I will say that's probably one of the toughest parts of being in that L&D space. What type of training is appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish? So, for in the case of like classroom learning, we typically have those when the learner has to get feedback and has to get coaching, like in real, they can't just watch something and weeks go by before they hear back to, hey, was that right? Did I understand that correctly? So, depending on what they need to do, the complexity of what they need to do and what they need to learn, that is really what we gauge to determine if classroom training is necessary. I don't think it'll ever be replaced, but you will probably see a lot more of, again, the mobile learning, of course, the micro learning. But I still do believe that there is a very important role that still plays because if you're new to a process or new to an industry or new to a trade, maybe that mobile learning is not going to get you very far without that expert that can coach you along. But I will say that maybe the future of technology may be that you can use those micro learnings and then easily get access to that expert, right? Kind of maybe in a forum to where in very close time they can respond back when you ask a question. So again, at this point in time, I'm not ready to let go of that instructor-led training, but it is still very important to, like I said, diversify that what the content and the learning experiences that your learning ecosystem does have, because different people need different things.
Yeah. And I love what we're hitting on here because the way you teach somebody, the way you train them, it's dependent on several factors. And like you mentioned, you're new to a process, new to the company. You might need that broader overview, which requires classroom training with an instructor. But then micro learning, you're out there, you've already gone through training, you're up to speed on how the equipment works. And now you're learning very specific things. So it's really, I think, important for manufacturers to understand that there's a role for different types of training. And it sounds like you guys have a rough framework you use to determine when to use certain types of training. Is that accurate?
I will say so. And again, there are different types of learning models that are out there, and one that pretty much aligns pretty well with what's going on is what they call the 70-20-10. So they'll say that about maybe 10% can be accomplished in the classroom formal setting. About 20% is that social learning. And then there's 70%, which is that on the job training. So you're just out there and you're doing your thing. But that 70% doesn't have to be, the wild, wild west. You could implement, like I mentioned before, those performance support resources like job aids and work instructions. You might be out there, but those instructions that you need to do the job correctly every single time should be within reach so that you can be consistent and really deliver on your performance time over time. Because our memories, you learn something today. If you don't apply it pretty soon, you're going to forget it. If you don't practice it, you're going to soon forget it. And the job shouldn't really be about memorizing. It's really about if I need information, do I know where it is and can I access it quickly to make the changes I need to make on the job? And that's kind of really where our focus also needs to be. Just making sure that they have the resources when they need it, as they need it, and make sure it's updated and current. But again, if they do need more support, one on one coaching and training, mentoring, that those resources are also available.
Yeah, it brings back memories of the hotline, the red phone, and you pick that up and say, I need some help. And well, we still have that. It's just now it could be digital. It could still be a phone line. It could be an automated system, but the need is still there for that follow
Oh,
up.
yeah.
And people get really impatient if they don't get an answer fast. It frustrates them. And you don't want that. You don't want that in your workplace either.
Yeah, so it's almost like while things are changing, they stay the same. So again, that solution they still get what they need, but it's in a different way. And again, we're leveraging technology to get what they need to them quicker, updating it quicker. I mean, back in the days where everything was written in a book, to make a change, you'd have to find every book that was out there. And even when you had control documents, which is also very important, it also takes time to get those updated. So again, having technology that can update things and notify people, hey, something has changed. Look this over again. Read this over, verify that you understand it. Ask for help if you don't. Technology that empowers our workers to be able to get access to that information, that accurate information quickly, is going to really make the difference between those that do the learning and development space well and those that are going to continue to struggle.
LaRuthie, we can kind of I would say, just flip the viewpoint here from you as the running an L&D team to the expectations for workers. Michael and I have talked about this a lot. He coined the phrase, the shifting workforce, right? People don't stay in their roles very long. They're moving throughout the company or they're moving to different companies. So you have them for a short period of time. You want to try and keep them for as long as possible, but their expectations for how they're trained, how they're developed, it seems like the expectations are higher than they've ever been because there's organizations doing it really well. I'm curious from your perspective, how have those expectations changed and how are you guys adapting to those changes?
Well, I'm finding that the learners or the newer associates that we do bring in, they do expect to be developed. They expect to be empowered to do their best work. So again, the onus is truly on the organization to provide that. And depending on what that experience looks like, sometimes that impacts whether they'll stick around or not. So again, like I said, I'm fortunate to work for an organization that truly invests the onboarding and the development and really truly making people feel confident and competent and capable to do the work that they're doing. But for those that don't, that say, "Oh, they'll figure it out when they get out there," they're gonna leave, because there's another company will, right? Another company will provide that experience that makes them comfortable doing that work. So it is really very important for organizations to truly be invested in ensuring that the new associates that they do hire, and even when they do make changes in an existing associate's workplace, that they do prepare them for that.
Yeah, some of the digital tools really get people excited and say, wow, you guys are up to date. You're using mobile devices. You're not using Lotus Notes or, modems or old technology. And I think it helps with your retention strategy. And would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. When they come in and they get to, they get access to like kind of a mobile device to kind of help them stay connected to the information that they need, it takes the load off, right? Because even if you do have someone who is teaching in like kind of a formal setting, if you're so concerned that you have to memorize everything that's being written on the board, you're not really paying attention to what they're saying. You're trying to write everything down and trying to keep up or trying to pay attention. I don't think our brains are really set up to receive that much information and retain it. But knowing that, hey, this information is also available to you when you need it as well, that does take a load off of the stress because you're already new and you're probably really nervous. So knowing that you don't have to memorize everything. There are some things you have to know because safety is very important, quality is very important, productivity is important. But these other key details, if you need it, it will be accessible to you. I think that will make it easier for people to want to stick around and stay.
We talk about anxiety a lot, and I heard you use the term confidence, which is, the opposite of having anxiety almost. A lot of folks who've been in manufacturing for a long time, you forget what it's like the first day you walk out into a plant. And I imagine like your plants, again, probably highly automated, big equipment. Like that's really intimidating. If you don't feel prepared, you've got that anxiety that, hey, if I mess up, we could have to scrap $100,000 worth of material or something like that. And so a lot of organizations, from what I've seen, that onus is on the employee a lot of times to go shadow with somebody, figure it out on your own. You're ready to do it on your own, which just doesn't meet the expectations of the younger workers coming into the industry anymore.
Yeah, we are recognizing that the newer generation, their expectations are much higher. And if we really want to keep them, we're going to have to really put in that effort or continue to put in that effort to make sure that they do feel comfortable and they do have the resources that they need to be successful.
Just a side question back to your organization. Do you have teams of writers and video content producers, educators, people with a teaching background on your team?
On my specific team, my specific technical team, we have more people that were the best in the field and came up through leading and coaching and even doing on the job training with their teams. But they were like the best technicians and the best mechanics and the best automation leaders. And now they're on my team. And so when they create content or even experts in their processes as well. So it's not just that I just know the general craft. They also are very skilled in the unique processes that we have in our industry. So that's just kind of a unique blend. And over the years, we've taken courses about writing instructions and creating content and things like that. But it's very important that we had a team that already kind of had that knowledge and skill built in. And as the technology changes, they're constantly being reskilled and learning about what's coming new and staying ahead of what's coming so that they can truly support it and prepare for what's coming. Because again, this is not a field you want to get into if you want to just learn one time and just hang it up. It's continuous learning and you really do have to adopt that attitude of continuous learning. Every individual in today's workforce is going to have to really adopt that mentality that I'm going to probably have to learn for the rest of the time I'm here. And that's okay. That's okay.
we're talking about Industry 4.0 and really why you need to have a learning and development organization or someone in your organization, some group focused on training and development. I'm curious for you think about the various leadership roles at Shaw and how do people get bought into the need for learning and development to play such a key critical role in developing people as you guys are adopting these new technologies? Did everybody see it and was like, yeah, that's really obvious? Or did it take some convincing? What was the process that happened while you were there that shifted you guys to, it sounds like, being a very focused learning organization?
I will say since I've been here, the focus has always been about learning and development. I mean, I think that might have been what it convinced me to stay. I mean, even as a co-op, I wasn't even a full-time worker yet, and there was just so much training, soft skills training and people training and leadership training, and just a willingness of just associates from our hourly associates all the way up to the highest level of leaders willing to just pull you under their wing and teach you things and share information and share knowledge. Again, I've worked in other places and they're not as willing to share information. So that was something that truly drew me to Shaw, and just kind of the focus on maybe in developing and investing in the people. I really do love that about this organization and makes it easy for me to do my job. And so again, I've always known this company to put a focus because again, the Shaw Technical Academy is just only one aspect of it. We have the Shaw Learning Academy. They focus on the leadership skills and the onboarding and the soft skills of all of our associates in the company. And then every facility has their own learning team. So it's learning all across the board. And I do appreciate that I do work for an organization that does value investing that time and ensuring that the associates have the ability to do what it is that we want and expect them to do.
It sounds like it's embedded in the culture of the organization. And it sounds like maybe it's been like that for a long time. I guess maybe a second question I have for you then, you've got operations, and I've always seen friction between learning and development at the corporate level and then operations at the plant level, just being total disconnect. How do you guys maintain that close working relationship to where you understand the needs of the plants and are supporting them with learning materials, training, whatever they need to support their workforce? How do you guys stay connected?
It's all about developing a partnership. So again, we just make sure that we're constantly connecting we meet with the teams. They reach out to us when they need things, when we foresee, hey, this might be coming. Let's connect and see if you all are aware of it. Let's connect if you see any support. But we do definitely continue to make connections. So we're constantly traveling to a lot of different plants because it's not about, hey, we got to call in, we're going to create all these things in this silo and then push out this content that maybe they didn't necessarily ask for. We make it a point to go out there and really observe what's going on, hear the needs of what they're going through, and then co-create those solutions for them. So again, it's all about that partnership. Learning and development is never going to be successful in a silo. You always have to connect with the people who are doing the work, the people that are having these issues and even the wins so that you can share those best practices across the enterprise as needed. So again, if you're going to do learning and development in a silo, you're going to have a hard time gaining momentum, getting people to even want to learn what it is that you're creating because it has to come from them and they have to believe that there's value in it before they're truly going to invest their time in learning it.
As I'm hearing you describe this, I'm really seeing your organization as a continuous improvement team, essentially focused on learning and development is what it really seems like almost. I've seen a lot of those continuous improvement teams within organizations always trying to find new ways or improve things, but your tilt is much more on the training side, which I think makes a ton of sense given all the changes going on in manufacturing right now.
We do recognize that if we're going to have people involved, and especially in my case, the technical side of things, if people are going to be involved, then there's a good chance that we're going to have to make sure that they, again, have the knowledge, skill, ability, and capabilities to support whatever changes we bring about. So we recognize that being our role, and we're pretty excited about that. My team is truly passionate about that.
And you're welcomed by the client or your sites or your ops organizations. I think that's huge. You've built that credibility, so they bring you in. And they're not trying to avoid you.
And again, that takes building those trusting relationships with them. I mean, I will admit, we weren't always welcomed in. There was a time there was like, oh, I don't know about that learning thing. But when you step back and realize, well, what would I want, right? I would want to make sure that if someone is creating a solution for me, they need to truly understand who I am. They need to understand what it is that I'm doing or what I'm trying to accomplish. And we need to partner up and truly come up with a solution that we can both agree on and it makes sense for the organization. And once we shifted our mindset and our strategy, focusing on the needs of the group that we do serve, it worked out. It started to work out really well for us.
Yeah, those doors opened up and away you go. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
LaRuthie, one of the final questions I know Michael always loves to ask about what's the ROI? What are the key performance indicators? I'm really curious when it comes to training, since you guys are so focused on onboarding and upskilling your workforce. Are there any KPIs you guys are measuring in terms of onboarding time or, what are some of the things you guys are looking at to measure the success of your programs?
That's a very good question. I will say when it comes to the learning and development space, it's really hard to get your hands around those hard KPIs,
Yeah.
but we're still working to create those. But definitely looking at who's truly consuming that content and what are the changes you're seeing in their ability to demonstrate those tasks. And fortunately for our team, we were able to kind of create a tool that can track some of that, you know, identifying if a person came in and said, I don't know if I can do that, or no, I can't do those things. And maybe when they completed the knowledge check, they weren't able to answer all the questions we were looking for. But after training and then practicing out there with an on the job trainer, and then finally being able to kind of demonstrate those tasks on their own, and us capturing that and seeing that whole arc of them going from, hey, I didn't really know much to, hey, now I'm really confident in my abilities. That is kind of one way that we're able to track that. Again, it's very helpful. So again, we were collecting data so that we make sure that we are making an impact. But again, it's still hard as far as learning and development because there's just so many factors that come into play. But again, we're working on it is the best way to answer that. If you ever come across anyone who has that answer, give me a call because I would love to know what others are doing. But there are ways to capture if your learning and development efforts are making an impact, but it's still really just hard to truly quantify that in numbers effectively.
Leave it to Brian to steal my question, but yeah, I do ask about the finances and I hear a lot that it's hard to measure. And you hit on a couple of things. I mean, I think you alluded to a competency model. Can they demonstrate it before and after through testing, through proficiency? I think confidence, we talked about that a little bit. Do they know where to get the answer? Do they know how to solve their own problem? Are they willing to do that? I think that's huge.
Oh
And
yeah.
then really, they all happen to start with C, but that commitment, are they committed to the learning process, committed to engaging in their personal development, reaching out for help, calling the hotline? Are they committed to doing that? And so they're intangible, but I think it does add up to a pretty strong return on investment over the long haul.
I agree. I certainly agree.
Well, LaRuthie, as we wrap up here, our final question for you. There's learning development, HR, whoever's responsible for training right now. It's a really challenging time because there's a lot of unknowns, what the future is going to look like and how do we adapt, the skill shortage and the labor shortage everyone's been dealing with. And I'm curious, are there any resources that you look to, whether it's figure out who's doing this, who's testing new things out, or what are some of the resources or people you follow for new advancements in this space?
Podcasts are very helpful. So I
Okay.
listen to lots of podcasts. I, of course, listen to your podcast. I know there's a learning and development podcast that I check out. You often learn about the new books that are out there about the different learning models, different strategies, what Industry 4.0 will do to L&D. So yeah, I always have at least 2 or 3 books on my I'm a book person, I'll admit it, that I'm going through to just figure that out. But you have to stay plugged in, the what worked maybe 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, might not be as impactful and effective. So you definitely have to just stay plugged in. If you are focused on L&D, find those L&D podcasts and resources that are out there and just kind of stay on top of it.
Great. Well, LaRuthie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was great to chat with you today and understand how you guys are doing things at the Shaw. It sounds like you've got a great culture there and looking forward to having you on in the future. And we could talk about, where you guys are at in a couple of years from now.
Sounds
We'd love
great.
an
Thank you for
update.
having me.
So we'd love an update, and we love your passion for this whole space. I just commend you for that. It's just awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Voices of Manufacturing podcast with Brian Sallee and Michael Muilenburg. This show is brought to you by Dazuki, the premier digital transformation solution that allows manufacturers to standardize operations. Our website, where you can listen to our episodes and find tons of helpful resources, is Dazuki.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter so you'll be the first to know about new episodes. That's Dazuki.com, and join us in creating the front line of the future.